Deific Mourning is the sophomore full-length album from Decrepisy, a Portland, Oregon-based death metal band, and one that was started by Kyle House after he left Vastum. And as he traveled back to Portland, ran into a lot of fellows who decided to help him with this project he'd been working on. It was a death metal kind of thing, and of course, Charlie Corinne and Jonathan Quintana are exceptional people to team up with in terms of getting a solid guitar solo. You know, one of the finer drummers in death metal right now. And that first album was a big deal. I think Emetic Communion was kind of a bopping, a little bit death doom influenced. It certainly had some kind of Funebrarum or Finnish death metal sound to it. There was a taste for heavier, down-tuned, sledgehammer death metal that was still groovy and whatnot. It was a cool record. And so I'd praise that record quite a bit when it released because there was a lot of surreal guitar tones, there was some experimentation, and there was just fine lead guitar work from Quintana. And I think that was kind of the big thing that kept me coming back to it over time, was that I wanted to hear those leads. I liked where they were placed. Basically, for this second record, everything has changed for this band entirely, except for some of those grooves still carrying through to this record. And so we'll get a sense for that with this clip as briefly as we can. So the biggest change here is that the vocalist, instead of House, is now Daniel Butler, who's well known for his work in Acephalix, Dragcar, and Vastum, of course. And because they both played in Vastum together before, you can definitely feel like they know what each other is going for, and Butler has really embraced a lot more layers and different expression in his performance, to the point where he's just a very fine point of interest on this record, which outshines most of the compositions, because sometimes it just feels like he puts more thought into his presence than the rhythms. And so what that ends up doing is accentuating the best parts of this record, which are more death doom oriented, and make quick changes happen alongside big grooves. The focus on simpler riffing on this record is far less interesting than the first, and some of those grooves survive in sequel here, but for the most part, you could tell they were kind of writing it as they were going along, and a lot of these songs just kind of end. A lot of these songs have two parts, the intro and the big riff, and they're just kind of done after a couple of verses through. And I think that sometimes that reads as an interesting avant-garde kind of doomed experiment, and other times it feels like an unfinished song. And so there are chugging death doom metal pieces along the way, but then there are also songs that are entirely atmospheric and built around these big points of dread, and they really prepare you for something big. And then the riff it's just kind of okay. I don't think that there are any amazing riffs that really stand out here, and it kind of lets down a lot of what the vocals, the atmosphere, and all that are doing. And I feel like here in that state, there weren't a lot of places for Quintana to insert himself into these songs, other than a couple of really standout parts, which are quite dramatic in these longer pieces. There are kind of trade-offs made here, but I understand there were circumstances around this record that definitely made a lot of this more difficult to create. And so that counts for something. But as a follow-up, they really didn't go quite as far as I thought they would with some of these kind of death rock influences, and having all these great musicians at their behest. We get something that has all this vibe, it has all this energy, it has got a ton of atmosphere that is foul and filled with sorrow and disgust. They just kind of chug along with it all the way whenever it comes time to really show off and hit a riff. And so, hey, that's not the biggest deal. It's still a pretty decent record. It's only one that I'd give a moderately high recommendation, especially if you're coming off of Emetic Communion and wanting something that is more directly in that spirit. We get the feeling and the style of House's compositions in this record. It definitely feels like Decrepisy Part 2, but at the same time, it just doesn't all gel together into songs the way that I was kind of expecting it to. They're more just kind of vignettes of ideas that are mostly formed. You know, for nowadays standards, that'll still be entertaining for most people interested in modern death metal in the U.S. death metal style. And so it's not really a big complaint, but it isn't exactly the follow-up that I was really looking forward to when I first saw this record. Not all bad. See what you think. Go listen to it yourself, make up your own mind, and and check it out on March 28th when it releases. Otherwise, read my review and see what I thought in more detail.